It happened in a heartbeat. 1 second, Carlos Alcaraz was gliding across the court in Tokyo with the grace of a champion, and the next, his body collapsed to the ground. The crowd gasped, a wave of silence rushing through the arena, as if time itself had stopped. For the young man, the golden hope of modern tennis, those few seconds felt like a nightmare unraveling in a broad daylight. His face twisted, his hand instinctively clutching his leg. And in that moment, a terrifying question hung heavy in the air. Was this the end of his tournament before it had even begun? For athletes, the line between triumph and tragedy is as thin as a blade of grass. One wrong step, one slip, one unlucky landing, and years of preparation can be shattered in a single instant. For Carlos, it wasn't just about pain. It was fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of letting go of the racket that had brought him this far, fear of facing the possibility that he might have to walk away. In those first moments, he admitted later, he thought he couldn't continue. The audience watched in suspense. Cameras zoomed in on his grim expression, commentators whispered nervously, and fans at home held their breath. Could the young Spaniard rise again, or would this be remembered as the day talent met its cruel limit? It was a scene every sports fan dreads, when brilliance collides with fragility. As he tried to stand, the body refused to obey. The first 5 minutes after the fall were agony, not just physically, but emotionally. Each step was uncertain, each movement weighed down by doubt. For any competitor, those minutes are the crossroads. Do you listen to the pain and surrender, or do you gamble everything on the hope that you can still fight? Carlos was caught in that silent storm. He confessed he had no confidence, that he truly believed he might have to pull out, and yet, even in despair, there was a flicker of something deeper. Perhaps it was pride, perhaps it was the echo of every childhood dream, every sacrifice made to reach this level. Or perhaps it was simply the knowledge that thousands of eyes were fixed upon him, willing him to rise. The fear was real, but so was the responsibility, to the fans, to the game, to himself. When the medical staff rushed to his side, the tension reached breaking point. Every test, every stretch, every press of the hand on his leg felt like judgment. Would they declare him unfit? Would the match be over? But then, almost miraculously, relief. The doctors found no severe damage. The pain eased. The stiffness faded. He could walk. He could move. He could fight. The weight lifted, if only a little, and with it came a surge of determination. The crowd roared as he returned to the baseline. It wasn't just applause for a player resuming a match. It was recognition of courage in the face of uncertainty. At that moment, the game transformed from a contest of points into a battle of spirit. Everyone knew this was no longer about tennis alone. This was about whether Carlos Alcaraz could rise from fear and write his own story of resilience. And so, the stage was set. Not for an easy victory, but for a duel between pain and persistence, between doubt and belief. The question lingered in every mind. How much fight does this young warrior truly have left in him? Every great athlete faces a moment when the body whispers, "Stop!" but the soul screams, "Go on!" For Carlos Alcaraz, that moment arrived in Tokyo under the unforgiving glare of the lights and the unblinking gaze of thousands. The fall had shaken him, but it was what came after that defined the battle. 5 minutes of darkness when every fiber of his being told him it was over, when every thought leaned toward surrender. He sat on the bench, chest heaving, sweat clinging to his brow even though the rally had ended minutes earlier. His eyes darted toward his team, searching for answers they couldn't give. Should he wave his arm, signal the referee, and walk off before making the injury worse? Or should he gamble, risk it all for the chance to keep fighting? It was a cruel dilemma. No doctor could make the choice for him. No coach could step into his shoes. This was the private war of an athlete against himself. The medical staff worked quickly, their hands probing, pressing, testing. Every touch was a question, every nod or frown a possible verdict. For a moment, Carlos braced himself for the worst. That one word that has crushed countless careers, withdrawal. Yet instead the verdict was different. No tear, no rupture. The tension in his face softened as the doctor looked him in the eye and said, "You can play." Relief, sharp and sweet, surged through him. The pain had not disappeared, but the fear had. Still, doubt lingered like a shadow. Could he trust his body again? Could he push off with full force, sprint for a ball, twist into a backhand without feeling the ghost of that fall? Athletes carry their bodies like warriors carry swords. Once the weapon is questioned, every move feels uncertain. For Carlos, the next few points were not about winning. They were about testing himself, rediscovering the rhythm that his injury had shattered. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tide began to turn. A cautious step, a tentative forehand, a rally that stretched a little longer than expected. Each successful point rebuilt a brick of confidence. The crowd sensed it too. Their nervous silence shifted into encouragement, applause rising like waves. With every strike of the ball, Carlos wasn't just playing his opponent, he was playing against his own fear. But the mind is a battlefield more treacherous than any court. In one moment he felt free, in the next he questioned everything again. It's the paradox every athlete knows. The body recovers faster than the spirit. Fear of the unknown lingers, whispering at the edges of confidence. What if it happens again? What if the next sprint is the one that breaks you? Carlos admitted afterwards that he thought about quitting more than once. The temptation was there, heavy and insistent. Yet something stronger held him back. The will not to betray himself, not to betray the fans, not to betray the game he loved. The pain was a threat, but walking away felt like a greater defeat. He was not ready to be remembered for surrender. As the set wore on, the transformation became undeniable. The fear that once gripped him loosened, replaced by a steady rhythm of resilience. With every game won, every point fought, his body no longer felt like a fragile burden, but like a weapon once again. What had begun as a story of potential collapse was slowly morphing into something else, something larger. The line between pain and glory had never been thinner, and Carlos was walking it with the fragile grace of someone who refused to fall again. The audience could feel it. They were no longer witnessing just a match, but a drama, an inner war playing out with every serve, every sprint, every gasp of breath. A few days before that fateful match, Carlos Alcaraz had wandered the halls of a samurai museum in Tokyo. He gazed at the ancient armor, the polished swords, the stern masks of warriors who lived and died by a code older than the game of tennis itself. He had laughed about it at the time, speaking lightly to reporters. I try to have a warrior mentality. But on this night, under the pressure of lights and fear, those words became prophecy. Because what is the samurai's spirit if not discipline under fire, loyalty to one's cause, and courage in the face of pain? Standing there on the court, still uncertain whether his body would betray him again, Carlos embraced that spirit. He was not just playing for points. He was playing to prove that resolve is stronger than fear. Every serve he delivered was a test, every sprint a defiance of weakness. The opponent across the net became less important than the demons within. Yet the crowd could see it. The fire in his eyes, the way he refused to drag his feet, the way he clenched his fists after each rally, as if daring fate itself to strike him again. This was no longer a young man shaken by a fall. This was a warrior refusing to bow. And like every warrior, Carlos carried a sense of duty, not only to himself but to the thousands who had filled the stands, who had paid not for a truncated match, but for the drama, the artistry, the joy of tennis. He confessed later that guilt would have consumed him had he stopped. Guilt that fans who had waited, cheered, and believed in him would go home disappointed. That thought became his sword. For the fans, he told himself, for the people who came to see me fight, the transformation was astonishing. Where earlier he hesitated, now he lunged with confidence. Where fear once anchored his feet, now resolve propelled them. The rhythm of the game returned, and with it, the charisma that has made him one of tennis's brightest stars. The stadium, once quiet with tension, erupted with every point as if witnessing not just a comeback, but a rebirth. The warrior code is not about perfection. It is about persistence. A samurai does not wait for the battlefield to be safe. He steps into danger knowing that only through struggle can honor be won. Alcaraz understood this now. He was no longer calculating what might go wrong. He was embracing the fight, trusting that whatever came, he would face it head on. By the end of the match, it was not just victory that mattered. It was the way he had carried himself. He had turned a stumble into a lesson, an injury into an initiation. From the museum to the court, the spirit of the samurai had followed him, reminding him that greatness is not measured by how you stand when things are easy, but how you rise when the world expects you to fall. The crowd knew it. The commentators knew it. And most importantly, Carlos himself knew it. He had walked into the arena as a tennis player, but left it as something greater, a symbol of resilience, an athlete who could channel centuries of warrior wisdom into a single match. When the final ball was struck and the scoreboard sealed his victory, Carlos Alcaraz did not roar in triumph the way he often does. Instead, he raised his fist quietly, almost solemnly, as if acknowledging that this win was about more than points. It was about survival, about the fragile line between collapse and courage, about the night he turned fear into fire. To the world, it looked like a tennis match. To those who watched closely, it was a parable of resilience. Every time he stepped back onto the baseline, he was telling us something. That the human spirit is capable of more than the body believes. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to fight in spite of it. And isn't that what sport is really about? Not just trophies and statistics, but the moments when athletes show us the raw essence of being human. The vulnerability of almost giving up. The strength of rising again. The beauty of persistence, played out on a rectangle of court beneath blinding lights. In Britain, fans have always revered fighters, athletes who embody grit, who take knocks and keep pushing forward. From boxers in the ring to footballers on muddy pitches, the national spirit has been built on resilience. Watching Carlos in Tokyo, though he is Spanish, felt strangely familiar. It was as if he had tapped into that very British idea of honor through struggle, of never surrendering until the very end. But there's something bigger here than national pride or even sporting history. Carlos' story on that night speaks to anyone who has ever felt close to quitting. To those who've stumbled, who've been told by pain or doubt that it's easier to walk away. We all have our own 5 minutes of darkness when the easy choice is to give in. What matters is whether we listen to that voice, or whether we find within ourselves the spirit of a warrior, however fragile, however small, and choose to keep going. That is why this match will be remembered. Not because of the scoreline, but because of the symbolism. A fall that could have ended everything became a testament to endurance. A moment of fear became a lesson in courage. And a young man, still carving his place in the history of tennis, showed the world that greatness is not the absence of scars, but the ability to fight through them. So here's the question I leave with you. When life knocks you down, will you walk away, or will you rise, like Carlos, and keep fighting? Because perhaps that is the real lesson of sport. Not how to win games, but how to face life. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own battles, then share it. Let others hear it too. Like this video, leave a comment about your own moment of resilience, and subscribe to this channel for more stories of athletes who show us what it means to be human. Together, we'll keep uncovering the untold dramas behind the games we love. This was not just a victory in Tokyo. It was a reminder for all of us. And the next time you face your own fall, remember Carlos Alcaraz, standing back up when the world thought he couldn't.